hard. The secret to these is refresh, refresh, refresh. So we're going to give people a couple of minutes to come on. See, even I haven't found us yet, and I know where to look. So it does take a few minutes. So I'll just say hello when you come on. Just let me know that you're here and where you're from. So I'll know that we're broadcasting live somewhere. Hello from New York. All right. That means, like, even though I haven't found us, it means there we are. All right, good. All right. Diane Gray. Hey, you, Diane Gray, you're coming on here. Just so you know, it's not even an ask. You're coming on here. I know you will. Sherry, New Hampshire. Judy, Minnesota. Diane from Sacramento. If you haven't been on with me, it's a little like Romper Room. That's like I see you, you see me. Angel from New Orleans. Jamie from Connecticut. Cher in Toronto. Garrick, Mexico. Paul, Los Angeles. Sharon's from New Jersey. Karen, Indiana. Shorty from Chicago. Oregon. Welcome, welcome, everyone. So just so you know, if you haven't been on before, because I know a lot of people have joined today, how this works is every day at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. East Coast, I come on live, chat, take on a topic, discuss it for about 10 minutes, read your questions, we connect. Part of this is because grief is so isolating. And just because we physically have to distance doesn't mean we can't create community. So this is our community. We're here to support one another, not fix one another. There's no fixing because we're not broken. We're in grief. So I come on every day. Then in the evening, I invite a guest on. Tonight's going to be the amazing Nancy Levin. If you don't know her, you're going to love her. I have lots of other people coming on. Like I just saw my friend Diane is on. I'm going to be inviting her to join us. Another friend, Heidi Horsley, is going to be joining us, who actually is recovering now from the coronavirus. And we do lots of topics in the evenings. Tonight, we're doing boundaries and grief, which is, you're going to love this because we all need to know this and you'll see why. Then we're going to, tomorrow night, Paul Denniston is going to do a grief yoga session. And after that, we're going to do grief for grandparents. Then we're going to have grief after the death of a spouse. Some others coming up from a man's point of view, from a woman's point of view. Then we're also going to have grief after a fiance has died. We've had some great ones already. I had Glenn Lord on last night. I would invite you to take a look at that. These all get saved, so check them out. And these evening ones usually come on around 5 or 6 p.m. Pacific time, depending on the day. We always let you know ahead of time. So we've had some great evening guests and some amazing ones to come. So I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're joining us. Let's see where everyone's from now. New York. Hey, Robin, Alberta, Bay Area. We had someone on from India earlier today. Manitoba, Alberta, Canada, Tennessee. Wonderful. Hey, Dolores, Los Angeles. Jody, San Diego. Great. Well, I'm going to introduce now a dear friend of mine. We teach together. We have so much history together. You're going to see that. Her name is Nancy Levin, and you probably know Nancy through many of the books she has written. She has written books, Worthy, Jump, and she has an amazing book out now, Boundaries Will Set You Free. Nancy also, I'm sure she won't mind me disclosing this, Nancy also had a brother who died, so she knows this world too. So I'm going to welcome Nancy on and bring her on here. Hey, Nancy.
Hi, David.
Good to see you.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you.
So one of the things you all will notice, you know, sometimes people will say, David, you're so together, or you know so much. And I'm like, only because I'm so messy and have made every mistake. And you'll get like Nancy knows my messiness. And all my close friends know the messiness. And I only know these things because I've made every mistake, whether it's in grief or in life. So Nancy's one of my go-to people who helps me so much. So Nancy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here with you and all of you this evening.
So there'll be many people on with us. There'll be people who watch this in the replay. I see Ohio's here, Illinois is here, Tulsa, wonderful, Michigan. I'm so glad that all of you are here. So I have to tell you, early on, I thought about when I knew you were writing this book, I thought, boundaries, that's interesting. We all need to know boundaries. When I read the work and we started talking, it astounded me how many boundary issues we have. Like you don't think they're boundary issues, and yet they are. So, and then I want to get into boundaries and grief.
Of course.
So tell us about boundaries in general.
Yeah. So the way I define boundaries as there are limits. They're the limits that we set around what we will or will not do, will or will not accept, will or will not tolerate. So essentially, it's what's okay and what's not okay for us. And our boundaries are very personal. There might be some sort of overarching boundaries that everyone, or most people live having, but the boundaries that are specific to us are ours. And so what might be okay for you might not be for me, and vice versa. So the first piece is really understanding that our boundaries are ours, and they're very specific and they're very personal. And really at the baseline of the boundary is really knowing what's okay and not okay for me, which sounds very simplistic, but if any of you watching, I have identified in your life as a people pleaser or a peacekeeper or a conflict avoider or a not rock the boater or a rescuer, fixer, saver, this might be such an incredibly foreign concept, this idea that you're going to actually have to locate yourself first in order to then be able to know what is even okay or not okay. Because so many of us have been living this other reference life. We're living in reference to someone else. So we're so used to being in that place of, what does he or she think? What does he or she need? What does he or she want? And the invitation with boundaries is to be able to actually come in and ask the questions here first. What do I think? What do I need? What do I want? And again, it sounds very simplistic, but it might be such a foreign concept if it's something you've never done before.
And all those things you mentioned, we also may be living with one of those people.
Absolutely.
We could have some good boundaries, but maybe they don't. So, And Nancy, would you also just share? I know you're open about that. You had a younger brother, and then we're going to take a moment after that that we do as a tradition. But just tell us about your world that you've dealt with as a young brother.
So I often say that I was born into a mourning family. My brother had already been born. I came into the world and in what we now know, sort of, swimming in my mother's anxiety and fear. And so what happens is at a very young age, when we can't really process and digest what's happening in a healthy way because we're just far too young, we will take significant events in our life and we'll make them mean something about us. We'll internalize them and start to draw conclusions about ourselves. And this is the way our limiting beliefs get imprinted on us. So as I came into the world, my brother it was the early 1960s when he was born, and he had been diagnosed as mentally retarded. My parents did not know
the term they used.
That was the term they used in 1961. He was born in 61. And my parents didn't know anything was wrong with him because they didn't have all the tests back then that they do now. They didn't know anything was wrong with him until he didn't roll over and sit up and do the things a baby should do. And so then they realized something was wrong, and he was diagnosed, and really essentially his life was, he was really incapacitated, unable to do anything for himself at all. And so when I came along, it became very clear to me at a very early age, and again, this wasn't happening consciously, but I took on this idea, this belief that better I have no wants and needs because his are more important than mine. Better I be self-sufficient and independent. Better I not need anyone to take care of me. And ultimately, when he died, the belief of, if I am imperfect, if I am broken in any way, like he is, I will die. So therefore, I need to be perfect. So these imprints around perfectionism and around independence and self-sufficiency and not wanting to be needy were all the things that were happening. And again, I was only 2 years old when he died. But this is when...
His name, please.
His name was Jamie.
Thank you.
His name was Jamie. And so all of this was happening, and this is how it landed in me. And what happens is when these beliefs really grip us at such a young age, they're really driving the bus of our lives, whether we know it or not. And usually we don't know it.
Right. So I'm so glad you're here. I wanted to give people, especially for the evening ones at a different time, time to get on.
Yeah.
And now that we're all on, one of the traditions we have, because I firmly believe, whether it's Jamie or my son David or everyone that's here, I don't believe when they die, we stop loving them or they stop loving us. So I would just like us to take a moment, just a moment of silence to dedicate to all those who have died but live in our heart. Thank you for all for doing that. It always feels like it kind of centers us because it's, you know, we always open this up with where are you from and all that, and we get in our mind. And now let's go back into this. So, you know, Nancy, it's fascinating. The other thing that people may not know is for years you worked at Hay House Publishing. We have a mutual friend, Louise Hay.
Yes.
And you ran all their events. What's your line? You say you had a backstage, what was it?
I had a front row seat and a backstage pass.
So you got to see some of the most brilliant minds in the world. And so as we begin this discussion, I think tonight, one of the things that just keeps coming up, and it kept coming up today, was this idea how to deal with the other in grief. And the other in grief is, I'm doing it wrong for them. They're doing it wrong. They say they have expectations on me. So what's that like? And I also wanted tonight talk about the pandemic too, because that'll be important. So how do we deal with the others who are in such a different place in grief because of their personality, their grieving style? They're just different from us, and we think we should be the same, or they think we should be the same.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, part of it is understanding that, you know, and I know you talk about this all the time, that there is no one way to grieve. There is no right way to grieve. That grieving will ebb and flow, you know, that there's no timeline for grief. But, and I also think part of it is really getting clear on what do I need here? What can I give myself, and what can I ask for? And understanding that. And also, you know, I think that being able to verbalize the need is, again, really significant and might really feel like a tall order or a stretch if it's not something that you're used to doing in regular life, feeling like you can name a need.
So let's drill into this. So, like, I'm just thinking about some of the comments today. My friend doesn't get my grief.
Right. So here's the thing. it's actually not important for other people to understand us. What's important is us to honor our own needs. So I would say put less attention on needing to be understood and put more attention on how you can honor yourself in your own process.
It's interesting. I'm just going to note this because someone wrote it today and I told them I would answer this. They say, why do you keep talking about honoring grief? Grief should not be honored. So just so you know, when I use the word honoring, I believe grief is the love we had and have still. This living moment. I have lots of love in this moment for my parents, for my son. That doesn't go away. So when I say honor the grief, I am saying I'm honoring the love, I'm honoring their life, I'm honoring my feelings that are organically happening. That's what I mean by honor. In no way am I saying let's honor the fact they've died. It's not that. So I just wanted to clear that up since you use that word too, so people know that's what I mean by honor.
Yeah, I mean, the honoring is the love, and it is the attention also. I want to name that too, because what I was saying before about having all of that attention outward on someone else and trying to get something from someone else, or trying to be understood by someone else. Really, it's about, can I turn the attention back on me? Can I put the attention here?
Right.
And that's a place to begin.
And let me give you some of the questions that came in ahead of time. A lot of people, this is Jan, a lot of people tell me to stay strong. I don't understand this comment. What is strong anyway? Why do I have to be strong?
Yeah, and so you don't. First of all, you don't have to feel anything other than how you feel. And that's part of the honoring grief as well. Honoring what is true for you. And you can simply let people know, thank you for your concern. I'm grieving in my own way.
That's really, I would love it if we could sort of give a translation after each one, because that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And the other thing we have to remember, stay strong a lot of times says, please quit having the feelings that are making me uncomfortable.
Exactly.
And you know what? I saw someone once say, I'm really sorry my grieving is making you uncomfortable, but I have to grieve my way.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. No, you go.
Jody says, it really bothers me when people say things like, he's an angel now. You'll see him someday. He's with the Lord. These comments upset me. What can I do?
You can simply say something like, I understand that's what you believe. And I'm doing this my own way, or I believe something different, or whatever it is. You can acknowledge them with gratitude and grace, and then you can name what's true for you. You don't have to apologize. You don't have to give a song and a dance, a reason, an explanation. And here's the other thing I'll say is that, someone else's response to your truth is not your responsibility to manage.
Right.
So one of the ways we cross over our own boundaries, because another boundary here is is the borderline between where I end and you begin. And where am I stepping over the boundary to go into your territory? And what are the ways I'm letting you step over the boundary line into mine? And so it's simply to be able to say, thank you. I get where you're coming from. I'm doing this my own way.
And it's really all right to have options there. I think of that I can, say thank you, period.
Yep.
I can say thank you, explanation. This is a teaching moment. By the way, I know you love me and care about me. You're kind of pointing out a silver lining, and I'm not feeling a silver lining right now. And I would just love for you just to be with me in my pain. Take it as a teaching moment. Maybe you just get upset, and you have a right to get upset. I think we're grief illiterate. That's the reality.
Yeah, it is.
We don't know how to do this.
Something you just said, I think, is really important about being able to make the request of how you want to be held.
Right.
And this is something that I did it today with a friend. Something was happening. I wanted to express something, and I literally started the conversation with, I'm letting you know from the outset, I want to share this with you. You don't need to fix this. I don't want you to offer your opinion. I don't want any unsolicited feedback or advice. I simply just want you to hold what I'm sharing with you. Can you do that? And he said, yes. And I said, great. So now I'm going to share what I want to share. And when I'm ready to ask you for any input, I'll let you know. This is something we never learn we can do. We never learn that we can actually let someone know how we want to be received, and we can ask them if they're available to receive us in that. So even with grief, we can say, I'm grieving. This is really tough. Are you able to just hold space for me? Can you just sit with me in silence? Can you just hold my hand and breathe? Or we're not really holding hands right now, but you know what I'm saying.
Virtually.
Virtually, right. Can you hold my hand virtually? Right.
We're virtually.
Right. Can you hold my hand on Zoom? Or can you just sit with me in silence until I'm ready for more? But right now, here's what I need. But again, we're so used to deflecting our needs.
It's 100% true in my world, what you're saying. And I want you to know, it feels like a non-communication. It feels like communication is weird when you set sort of those rules. But here's how we talked about it today. And I've learned this. The reality is, tomorrow, Nancy, I could call you out of the blue, and you might, I know you love me, I know you want to talk to me, you might say, about to start a conference call, bye. And that could be because I caught you in a moment you're about to start a conference call. I don't keep up with every date in your world. I don't expect you to keep up in every date in my world. Let's say it's not, but let's say tomorrow was my son's birthday. I could call you up and say, hey, Nancy, and you're like, sorry, David, can't talk, call you later. And I could go, I can't believe it's my son's birthday and Nancy did that to me. The reality is, I have to find enough self-love and compassion to set you up to support me, to text you the night before and go, Nancy, tomorrow's going to be a hard day.
Yes.
David's birthday. Can we find a time to talk?
Yes.
And I think sometimes, just like you say, can we say in this moment, just like you did to your friend, I don't need fixing. I need a listening ear. Or, sometimes I just know in my world where I'll go, do you want feedback on this? Because we don't know what the other person needs.
That's right. Right. And we automatically assume that they need what we need, or we automatically assume, right? We automatically assume that they, like I do, this same friend I was talking about today, he's all about unsolicited feedback. He loves getting feedback and he loves giving it. And I don't like it.
I love me. I love feedback. Anyone who has things for me, I love feedback. But
right. But I have right. But I've had to set a boundary with him around, I am not available for unsolicited feedback.
Right.
And so we have to understand, it's kind of like love languages. We have to understand what the other person, what's the other person's up to, what works for them, what works for me, and how do we actually meet in that. But in all of that, we get to actually ask for what we need, and we get to see if the other person is available for what we need.
So let's go there. Another topic I hear a lot is, I'm just not getting it from my husband, from my sister. The person in grief has identified one person they want to get it from. And if they don't get it tomorrow, they're going in the next day and the next day. What would you say to them?
Well, so, there's the expression, don't go to the hardware store for milk.
Right.
And that's what I would
say. Unpack that for us.
So, it's like, whatever, it's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, going and having this idea that your significant other or your sister or your best friend or whoever should be the one who gets you and can hold you in this. And it just might not be the case. And so part of it is really understanding who in your life has the capacity to meet you in what you're in. And it really might not be the person you most want it to be. It might not be the person you expect it to be, or the person you think it should be. And you really might need to go source that support elsewhere.
Right. And we talked today about practical grievers, that some people aren't going to be grieving like us, and they're not going to be able to give us what we want, which comes back to the getting milk.
Right.
Let me do a few more questions here for you. How do you maintain relationships with those who don't seem to want to know how you're doing? In other words, how do we remain authentic with loved ones while protecting our feelings when it doesn't feel safe to express to them?
I mean, I think we have a choice of who we decide that we're going to open up to. And I think, not every relationship, even, family, not every relationship has to be that we're, pouring out our guts. There are going to be different layers, different calibrations. And the important thing for us to know is where we feel safe, where we feel met, and where we feel that we can really be in our authenticity. And sometimes the boundary is knowing, oh, I can show up fully here, and I can't quite show up fully here, but the priority for me here in this relationship where I can't show up fully is actually still staying connected. So I still want this relationship, even, it's an important relationship to me, even if I can't show up fully. And part of it is just the recognition of it so that you don't have resentment around it.
Yeah, I think, the one thing I remind myself is everyone plays a different note. And there are times, there's people, look, I know I can call Nancy, and this is what Nancy delivers on. And I also know there's people who they're going to talk about the weather, and they're not going to go deep with me. I have to realize there are times I actually need to be distracted, and my superficial friends are really good for that.
Totally.
They're not good for going deep. I got to know who to call, right? So Shirley says, after my husband passed, my sister said to me one day when I was struggling, you're not the first person to go through this. How would I respond to that? We haven't spoken since. How do we get over those kind of comments?
Yeah, I mean, what I like is that you're actually taking the time before responding, so that you're getting to sit with this, because you don't actually have to respond or react. You get to actually sit with this and digest. And then when you want to come back together with her, it is from the place of, I in order to honor our relationship, here are the things that I want to share with you. Here are the ways I want to open up to you. Let's actually come together in a collaboration and find what works for us. Instead of going into defending or getting defensive or making excuses or giving the reasons to validate your own experience. So that's what I would say. It's not about going in with your own self-validation to then get her stamp on it.
That's been a key for me. That's been a key for me that I've learned when I get centered in my boundary. When someone wants me to do something I don't want to do, if I'm centered now and clear, it comes out as no, thank you. Before it used to be, let me explain it to you, because then if I explain it to you, maybe you'll give me the stamp of approval. And I don't need that.
Yeah. And, it's a big piece, this whole, again, for all the whole list of reasons around the people pleasing and the peacekeeping and all that. It's a big thing to get in contact with our no and to recognize that we don't want to say yes from that knee-jerk place anymore.
Right.
We want to be able to say an authentic no.
So let's go for a moment into our pandemic, since we're already in a pandemic. It's crazy.
I know.
I will just share something in my world. Nancy knows me. I'll be very honest here. I have a friend who 2 weeks ago found this concept silly, and it's a flu. Calm down, everyone. It's a flu. And it was troubling that saw each other. I was physically distancing. This is a smart, loving person who would give his right arm for you. I mean, the most loyal, amazing person. Tried in that meeting to give him some of the medical information to make sure he knew in case he had a medical deficit. Saw him again yesterday, and was just shocking how this just is not registering. And he is a close friend. I hate that he is alone through this. I want to make sure he has some interaction. And it's challenging because, like, last night, we took a bike ride together and stayed on a pretty isolated place. And he goes, let's go to the park. And I'm like, no, we're not supposed to legally go to a park. And he goes, there's hundreds of people there. And I'm like, all the more reason I'm not going to a park. What part of this don't you understand? But then at a certain point, he stops. He goes, I'm going to go in the 7-Eleven and get a drink. And I'm like, do you want a mask? Do you want gloves? Do you want sanitizer? No, it's a 7-Eleven. It boggles me. And of course, I get the concept is I have to stay in my lane. My job is to protect myself, to make sure I stay healthy. I can make the choice. This person doesn't get it. Maybe I'm just not going to see them, even physically distance, if they're not going to do this. But Nancy, I so want to call them 100 times and just go, please, let me explain this to you. You're smart, you're intelligent. I don't know why you're not getting it.
I know. I get it. I really do understand that. But what you said embedded in there is the important piece. Our boundary is really about naming what's okay and not okay for us and how we are going to take care of ourselves. So it's not about what he's doing. It's about how can I take care of myself? So like you said, it might end up being that you decide not to actually see him even 6 feet apart, that you actually make the choice to stay, to see him on Zoom or however that is.
Right.
It's interesting. What I've heard from many clients right now is that this whole pandemic is giving them sort of like the hall pass to set boundaries a little more easily.
That's interesting.
That they're able to say no a little more easily because they can sort of fall back on, like, we're not allowed to do that right now.
Right.
Even my niece, who's 18, a friend of hers kind of came to her with the same thing. Like, this is a whole load of crap. Let's go out, and she said, people are dying. Like, I don't know what's happening, but people are dying and I'm not going out. I'm not leaving the house. Like, I'm going for like a walk with my mom and the dog, but I'm not going out with friends. I'm not seeing other people.
Right.
And she said it kind of like gave her permission to actually do what felt right for her, that this whole pandemic sort of like gave her the hall pass.
Right. Right. And I also think, grief is such a time to gather. And we aren't able to physically gather.
Yes. I know my father was telling me, so, in the Jewish faith, you sit Shiva, and
the first week after,
and then you have to have a minyan, which is 10 typically 10 men, but now they will say women and men. And you have to have, to say the prayers. And now they're doing like Shiva and minions via Zoom,
Right.
in this period of time that my father's been participating in,
Yeah, because I think it is a moment to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
We do have to adapt and keep each other safe.
Yeah.
We have a church here in California that's on the news that defied everything today and said, we don't care.
I know.
We're honoring, our God, and, sort of defied it all. And I feel like I'm so spiritual and religious, and I just think a loving God does not want to cause harm.
I know.
But,
it's really hard.
It's not my lane. So, we've got to keep doing that. Does anyone have some questions from Nancy that she wants to, as Nancy's glowing in the sun there?
I know. I'm like, I can see where the sun's coming in, and I'm in this glow light. It's kind of funny.
It's great. You're just glowing. It's fine.
I'm glowing.
I was surprised. Wait, then it's gone that quickly. Let's see. My partner has not been supportive as he was hang on, I got to go on here because they're zipping through fast here. By the way, Beth, I see is coming on, our friend Beth. She's going to be joining us to talk about I
love it.
Death after when your fiance dies.
Yes.
Okay. Here we go, Kathy. My partner has not been supportive as he was when my sibling died last year. He seems indifferent lately. I'm struggling with my loss and have spiraled into a depression. This has taken a toll on our relationship. I've built resentment, and I'm worried that this will be a huge factor that will end our relationship. I don't have many friends or family since I moved to the U.S. for unemployment, making this very difficult. So, when you have someone, it kind of comes down to someone's not honoring her grief, her partner, and she's spiraling into a depression. And I think it is like you say, where we're hoping to get validation for our grief from the other.
Yes, and that's the piece. I mean, anytime we're looking outside of ourselves, really, anytime we're looking outside of ourselves like that, we're going to be left longing. We're going to be left wanting. And so it's not actually going to give us the healing experience that we're looking for.
Right.
And we may need to make some choices here. Like what I was saying before, recognize that this person might not be the person who has the capacity to hold you in this. Where can you get the support that you need? And how can you also be able to create for yourself the self-nourishing, the self-nurturing, the self-resourcing to bring you in contact and connection.
Right. And I had Glenn Lord on last night, and we said it so beautifully. I would invite anyone to go back and watch that the reality is Glenn had a son who died, Noah. And I am never going to understand what it's like to have a son, Noah, die. And he's never going to understand what it's like to have a son, David, die. We look at the other and expect them to know what we're going through.
Right.
They may never, even with our best explanation and them being willing to listen, understand our loss.
Yeah, it's very true.
Diane says, Diane Gray, I love my Diane Gray, who was just so helpful to me. Do you believe this newfound behavior pattern of creating boundaries will stick post-coronavirus?
I mean,
like growth boundary-wise?
I would like to believe that it will stick. I think we're all learning new ways of behaving. We're learning new ways of relating to ourselves and relating with others. I think, there's been lots of conversation everywhere about whatever the new normal is going to be. We don't really know, but we know we're not going back to anything. And something that I keep seeing around this time is this particular climate, to me, is really illuminating changes we may have wanted to make in our lives, but didn't have the courage and confidence to make before. And now there's sort of an illumination and an attention on what can I do differently now, and what can I actually do different so that who I am on the other side of this shows up differently. And I do think that that's a way in which we're sort of paying attention to being an acceptance of what is, and as we're still becoming and moving forward.
These are such wake-up calls to, at the end of the day, we realize we only get one life. And I think about, there was a lot written on how many breakups occurred around 9/11 and the aftermath.
Right.
And I have a friend, they're going through a breakup right now. They're like been home with each other and they're like, let's talk. And I think it is a moment where you go, this is my life. It could end. Am I happy with it or not? And
right.
If I'm not, and it could end, I might want to get happy with it. All right, here's a good question for you. I love this. Kathy says, what about people dealing with silence, people who aren't saying anything at all? Tell us, how do we speak to someone giving us the silent treatment? Or
so I don't want to throw a lot of labels around.
Right.
However, what I will say is that when people use the silent treatment, there is likely some level of narcissistic behavior involved. And it's nearly impossible to reason with someone of that mindset. And I'm not even talking about, diagnosed as narcissistic personality disorder, because
we're all on one end or the other.
Right, because there is, there are absolutely is there's part of the population that has the diagnosis, but there's also really garden variety narcissism.
So unpack that a little more. Why, tell me how their narcissism is like, is it just that, like, in my world, I want to be silent, so your world doesn't count?
Or it's a power dynamic of shutting you out.
Right.
And so that usually someone on the other side of a silent treatment, so to speak, is feeling a great need around being understood, or around getting through, or around giving in or acquiescing, or in the mindset of what do I need to do to make everything be okay. So it really, the silent treatment giver and the silent treatment receiver are ultimately in a really codependent relationship, because the person who's who's on the outside is living in a discomfort because they're so used to being regulated. They're so used to having someone else regulate them emotionally. So the practice for the person who is on the other side of the silence treatment is really about, how do I bring myself into my own emotional regulation instead of depending upon what's happening with this other person regulating me.
And I want to throw one other possibility in there. I can't tell you how many people have said, maybe they've gone to something I've done or read or something, and they said, when my friend's loved one died, I did not know what to say, so I thought nothing and silence was best. And they realize later that for the person in grief, we don't go, oh, Nancy's silent, I'm sure she's trying to figure out how to handle this. We go, I can't believe Nancy is not acknowledging my pain.
And I think
that's the other, right?
No, I mean, I definitely think that's a big piece. And I think that, again, if we listen, none of us were really taught how to be what the right thing to say is, and we're not really comfortable in our own discomfort. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is simply reaching out and saying, I'm thinking of you. Something of some kind of acknowledgement like that. It doesn't have to be a whole, it doesn't have to be a whole war and peace.
Right.
And I think that the people who are on the side of the silence, a lot of in that case, it's really, I don't know what to say, so I'm not going to say anything. And then there's a misperception that I don't care.
Right. Candace says, my daughter passed away 15 months ago, and my family doesn't talk much about her. And I want to talk about her, remember her, and honor her life. I find it difficult to deal with, and I'm starting to resent my family.
Mm.
And I think families try to protect each other in ways that work and ways that don't. They could be a loving family going, we don't want to cause her pain. There's this weird thing that happens, like, we don't want to bring it up. She probably forgot her child died, which is like, no, that's not happening. But we are afraid of inflicting pain.
Right.
So, and one of the things that someone commented on is I talk about in grief, we shouldn't have to do this, but we do have to give instructions. I usually use the example around Christmas time, that if you're going to go to a party, maybe it's been a year, whatever, you're ready to venture out in a party, you've got to be the one to walk in and say, I'm really glad I'm here. It's been a hard year with David dying. And you name it for everyone so they know you can talk about it. And I think she might have to communicate, I don't know if Candace has, in saying, it actually helps me to talk about my child. Is that what you would suggest?
That's definitely 100% what I would suggest. Being able to say what's true and to make a request and to see if others are willing to meet you there. Right. And I do, like you said, no, you don't forget. It's not that. And sometimes, and again, different people, different ways. But if for her, if what's gonna be most supportive and helpful for her is talking about it, then really being able to invite people into the conversation. It can be so healing for the family.
All right, this one breaks my heart. Ketty says, I wonder how to set boundaries when someone approaches you and tells you, I want you to know your son is in hell because he committed suicide. Heartbreaking. I'm just so sorry on top of your loss that you have had to deal with that. And just so you hear it from someone else, your son had an illness of his mind. He did not commit a sin. Just had to throw my 2 cents in.
No, and I'm so glad you said that. And I know that there's been the whole relanguaging around suicide, and I think it's helpful.
So what could you say if someone says that to you? I mean, obviously you have the choice to walk away, to slap them, do all those things, but maybe it's on the phone, so what can you say your relative said to you? Well, they're in hell. What do you say?
What do I say is, to me, even secondary to how am I going to take care of and protect myself here. Okay. So it also depends on the context of, is this someone I'm in an important relationship with? Is this someone in passing? Whatever it might be, because choices might need to be made.
Do both. So let's start with, it's someone you run into at the grocery store. Right. You're never going to see them again. What do you say?
Can just say, I understand that's how you feel, or thank you very much, or walk away, or, whatever it is that gets you out of the moment. You don't owe them. You don't owe them a response. You don't owe them anything to even make them feel received. Let me say it that way.
Wow, say that again. You don't
owe them anything to make them feel received.
That's so important. That's so important. It may not even deserve an acknowledgement.
That's right.
And if you want to use it as a teaching moment, I think you got to teach without expectation. I have a loving God. He loves my son. It is an illness. I wish you well. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
it can be. It can.
So
yeah.
if it's your mom who lives next door, you're going to see her every day. Then what are we saying, Nancy?
Then part of it is being able to be clear about, I'm letting you know that that's not how I feel. And I'm not open to hearing that from you. So if you continue dropping that into our conversations, I'm simply letting you know that I will change the subject, or I might also hang up the phone.
Right.
So again, a boundary is not telling someone else what to do. A boundary isn't even about someone's behavior changing. A boundary is simply saying, here's the impact on me, and here's what I'm going to do to take care of myself.
Right.
So, it's not, don't say this to me anymore. It's, I'm letting you know that I don't want to hear this. And if you keep saying it, here's what I'm going to do.
And I think sometimes what we have to say, for me, that I've said, and I've seen people say this, is, I use you because you're just here with me. Nancy, I love you. I want to be in a relationship with you. If you keep saying, my husband, my wife, my partner, my child has gone to hell, we're just not going to be in a relationship. So I want you in my life, but that creates more pain. And if you were in pain, Nancy, I would never want to create more pain. So that's how I'm going to handle it. Let me know if you want to keep showing up within that boundary.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful.
I'm trying to touch my face with
without your hand.
Nancy, I'm afraid to touch my face in the shower. It's like.
And look, I'm touching my face right now because I have an itch.
As long as your hands are clean, just reassure.
My hands are clean. I'm home alone.
Right. So we're out of time here, Nancy. I love you. I love that you are just here with us and helping so many people. If people want to find out more about you and your world, how can they do that?
Simply go to my website, nancylevin.com. All the stuff is there. Everything, all the ways to find me.
So Nancy, you are a gift to others. You are such a gift personally to me. I thank you for being here so much.
Thank you. I love you so much.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. And I made Nancy solo. I need to make me solo. I'm learning still this year. So one of the things, folks, if you're new to joining us, we meet 1 p.m. every day Pacific, or that's 4 p.m. Eastern. A great place if you're in different parts of the world. People watch this in India and the UK and Australia. You can go to thetimeconverter.com and just put in 1 p.m. Pacific, and you will absolutely see the time we are for you locally. And then in the evenings, we have a different topic every night with different guests. Nancy is our amazing guest. Glenn Lord last night. Tomorrow night is going to be Paul Denniston, who's going to do a mini grief yoga session that you can do in a chair. The next night is going to be Bradley Vinson, who's going to talk about being a grandparent and dealing with grief. We're going to have a few people on who are going to talk about a spouse dying. Beth is going to be joining us when your fiance dies, and ways to let you know you're not alone and we can be with one another and care for one another and still support one another even in a pandemic, because grief is so isolating. And this is not a time for us to be socially disconnected. So we're meeting here twice a day to help you, to help us to connect with one another. If you know someone who's grieving alone, who's feeling isolated, please let them know about this. Invite them in to join us. I thank you so much for being here, for sharing your loss and your love and your dear one's life with us. It means so much. While I'm here twice a day usually, this is mainly a peer support group. The people are very loving. They support each other. Give support, get support, and thank you. I so appreciate you. I will see you tomorrow. And we'll pick out a topic each day that you can ask questions on. Take care. Thank you.